Hey guys, welcome to Calm History. My name is Stefan. Tonight we slip inside the stony hush of a medieval castle just after sundown, where the fires are low, the walls breathe cold, and the kind of quiet that settles over everything feels watchful. You'll pass under a portcullis that groans like it remembers every siege. Stone towers loom like sleeping giants, and the scent of damp earth clings to every corridor. A torch flickers ahead. Somewhere deeper in, you hear a rat skitter across an unseen wooden beam, and suddenly the cozy fantasy of castle life starts to unravel. Because what no one mentions in the storybooks is this: castles at night were, frankly, unhinged. Between the cold, the noise, and the stuff crawling in your bed, it's a miracle anyone got any sleep. Seriously, you probably won't survive this, unless you've got the patience of a monk and the bladder of a camel. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck through a low archway and find yourself in the inner bailey. The sun's last smear of gold vanishes behind the crenellations, and already the courtyard feels colder. Not cool cold. Like someone flipped the temperature switch to stone coffin. The high walls trap the chill like a bull traps soup, except the soup is wind and regret. You pull your cloak tighter. It's wool, scratchy, a little damp around the edges, because everything's a little damp in a medieval castle. You pass a bundled-up servant carrying a sputtering torch. Her breath fogs the air. She nods, doesn't speak. No one really wants to linger outside longer than necessary. Inside the keep, it's no warmer. The walls are thick, some nearly 10 feet, but insulation. Never heard of her. Historians still argue whether tapestries were used more for warmth or for status, but either way, you find yourself staring longingly at a faded one depicting a stag hunt. Not because it's beautiful, because it's fabric. You consider leaning against it just to leech off a few degrees of warmth. At your feet, the floor is either stone or hard-packed dirt depending on which hall you're in. There's rushes scattered about, dried plant stalks meant to soften your step and soak up filth, but they don't do much for the cold. Your toes are basically medieval popsicles. You finally reach the chamber where you'll sleep tonight. Chamber might be generous. It's a shared space above the buttery. Wooden beams overhead, a small hearth along the wall, and at least 5 other bodies already claiming straw pallets around the room. One man is already snoring. Someone's dog is curled up beside another's feet. You pretend not to notice the flea scratching behind its ear. Or the second dog. Or the fact that the second dog might actually be a pig. A young squire next to you shivers so violently his teeth chatter like dice in a cup. You give him a weak smile. He offers you the corner furthest from the fire and closest to the drafty arrow slit. Classic. So you lay out your bedding. It's a thin mattress stuffed with straw that smells faintly of mold, sweat, and something distressingly barnyard. There's no such thing as sheets. You'd get 1 blanket, if you're lucky. 2 if you stole someone's earlier. You lie down. The first thing you notice, your hip hits the floor. The second thing, something in the straw just moved. You lie perfectly still, trying not to imagine anything with more than 4 legs sharing your space. The warmth from the fire doesn't reach this far, and your breath is visible in the moonlight streaming through the slit. There's a low hum of whispers across the room. Someone farts. Someone else mutters a prayer. Somewhere in the castle, a hinge groans open, slowly, ominously. You freeze. The squire next to you says, "It's just the wind." But is it? Historians still debate whether medieval people were genuinely more superstitious or just surrounded by an absurd number of things that creaked. Either way, your heart pounds a little too fast for bedtime. You curl tighter under your blanket. The stones under your back feel like they're soaking the heat right out of your spine. You try flipping over. Now your knee hits a splinter from the floorboard. You try again. Now you're staring up at the timber beams and hoping that, if one gives out, it lands just left of your face. One torch on the wall flickers and dims. You watch its shadow dance like some kind of silent, elongated banshee. Your eyelids begin to droop. And then, clang. Someone drops a bucket down the hall. You jolt. So does the pig dog. The snores pause, then resume, louder this time. Your eyes slowly close again, but a final, slightly maddening thought enters your brain before sleep has a chance to win. This was just day one of castle life. You wake up because something's crawling across your ankle. At first, you think you dreamed it, maybe a distant memory of beach sand or a warm cat. But then it happens again, and this time it's unmistakable. Skittering. Deliberate. Horrifyingly casual. You shoot upright, bumping your head on the underside of a low beam with a thunk loud enough to wake the squire next to you. He blinks at you with sleep-stupid eyes and mutters, "Fleas or rats?" before rolling over and pulling his blanket tighter. You're hoping for fleas. That's where we are now. You lift the edge of your straw mattress and are instantly greeted by a flurry of motion, thin legs, beady eyes, the shimmer of insect wings, and a musty stench that says nothing here was ever clean on purpose. Welcome to medieval bedtime, where the only certainty is that you are not alone. See, beds in a castle weren't luxurious cocoons of solitude. The mattress, if you had one at all, was usually just a linen sack filled with straw, feathers if you were fancy, or hay. Over time, that stuffing would break down, mold, or just become something else entirely. And that something else often included entire microecosystems of lice, bedbugs, and fleas, what modern science might call an absolute nightmare. You lie back down cautiously, hoping the blanket provides at least psychological protection. It doesn't. The itching starts almost immediately, not sharp enough to make you scream, but just constant enough to make you question every life choice that led to this moment. Historically, there's debate about how often castle dwellers changed or cleaned their bedding. Some chroniclers claim high-status individuals had bed linens laundered regularly by servants. Others insist that even nobility just added more perfume and hoped for the best. What is known is that certain beds, particularly royal ones, were considered so infested that they were periodically burned on purpose to get rid of the vermin. Quirky fact? Wealthy nobles sometimes hired bed turners, servants who'd crawl into the mattress first to warm it and maybe absorb some of the bedbug's attention. Talk about occupational hazards. As for you, your mattress doesn't come with a bed turner, or sheets, or peace of mind. You try again to sleep. Maybe if you lie very still, the bugs will get bored. Your brain starts cataloging bites. Was that a flea? A spider? That thing on your thigh just now, did it have wings? You roll over, and immediately regret it. The rushes scattered across the floor crunch under you, releasing a faint odor of decaying herbs. Lavender and wormwood were often mixed in to mask the smell of sweat, ale, and body. Emphasis on mask, not eliminate. It's only been 30 seconds and already you've built a full courtroom drama in your head. Who brought the fleas? Was it the squire? That suspicious pig dog? The old lady with the fox pelt hood? She had an air of quiet menace, like someone who secretly trained squirrels. Your mind wanders like this when you're sleep-deprived and crawling with parasites. Eventually you decide to sit up. The fire in the hearth has dwindled to a sullen orange glow. One of the men near it is sleeping with his mouth wide open, catching embers like they're snowflakes. You envy him. Somehow, despite the lice and the draft and the chorus of snoring and mumbling and muttered prayers, he is asleep. The medieval lottery chose him as tonight's winner. Another roll of your neck. A crack. You adjust your blanket and scratch your shoulder. No, your hip. No, your entire leg. Every movement triggers another mystery itch. You think about that story you overheard earlier. The one about the monk who claimed the Virgin Mary appeared to him at night and told him to stop scratching and pray instead. Historians still argue whether that was a pious hallucination or just a medieval way of saying, deal with it. You slump back down onto your crunchy, possibly haunted mattress. Maybe the fleas are like sleep fairies. Maybe if you stop resisting, they'll just carry you away into dreamland. You close your eyes. You imagine warm sun. You imagine the beach. You imagine biting the squire's ankle out of pure, equal opportunity spite. Something thumps in the hall. You freeze. It's probably another servant. Or the pig. Or a rat dragging someone's sock. But you don't move. Because if there's one thing scarier than bedbugs, it's bedbugs in the dark, in a place where hygiene and ghost stories share the same corner of the imagination. The torch has gone out. And the night is still very long. It starts with a full bladder and a slow, dawning horror. You've been lying in the dark, itchy and mildly offended by the concept of shared air, when you feel it, the unmistakable pressure, the growing internal protest. You try to ignore it. You shift. You breathe. You whisper threats at your own organs. But the urge is undeniable now. You have to pee. Welcome to medieval castle nightlife, where bathroom options are as bleak as the draft blowing under the door. You sit up quietly, blanket clutched around your shoulders, eyes adjusting to the charcoal black room. A few bodies are snoring softly. One guy, bless his oblivious soul, is humming in his sleep. Someone else is muttering something that sounds suspiciously like, "Don't open the hatch." You decide not to investigate that further. You stand, and immediately your foot lands in something squishy. Not wet, thankfully, but certainly not dry either. The pig? A stray shoe? An abandoned sack of turnips? Honestly, could be all three. You shuffle toward the corner where the chamber pot sits. That's right, the chamber pot. Medieval castles didn't have en-suite bathrooms. For most residents, bodily functions at night were handled with ceramic or metal pots that sat quietly in dark corners, waiting to ruin someone's morning. The pot is almost full. You stare into it like you're gazing into the abyss. You're not sure what's worse, the smell, like hot vinegar and foot, or the fact that someone definitely missed. You brace yourself, do what you must, and try not to breathe through your nose. The clang of your belt buckle echoes in the quiet like a sword being drawn in church. In richer households, there might be a garderobe, basically a vertical shaft built into the outer wall of the castle that lets waste drop straight into the moat or pit below. Sounds fancy? Not quite. In winter, the breeze from that shaft is like kissing a glacier, and many garderobes were just holes carved into stone seats, rarely cleaned and often inhabited by spiders the size of your confidence. Historians still debate whether garderobes were ever used comfortably or just resented politely. Some even think the strong smells were meant to deter evil spirits. Which, if true, explains both medieval theology and medieval plumbing in one go. Quirky side note, some castle designers placed garderobes directly above the castle gate, so enemies trying to scale the walls might get an unpleasant surprise. Tactical urination. Peak Middle Ages. Back to you. You've managed your business, and now you're stuck with a new problem: what to do with your hands. You can't shake them dry, no towels, and touching anything feels like betrayal. So you tiptoe back to your bed like a guilty raccoon, hands out like a wizard mid-hex. You lie down again, swearing you'll never drink mead after sunset. Your blanket smells faintly of cabbage. The straw pricks your shoulder. The chamber pot gurgles quietly behind you. Someone coughs, once, twice, then stops. Probably fine. As you drift, you wonder how often these pots were emptied. Every morning? Twice a week? Did someone draw the short straw, literally, and get stuck on pot patrol? Maybe they tossed it out the window. Maybe that's why the courtyard smells like boiled onions and bad decisions. You'd ask, but there are no polite ways to phrase that at breakfast. Sleep teases you now, dragging soft fingers over your brain. The torch is gone. The fire's out. But it's finally still enough to doze. Until someone across the room kicks over the pot. The splash is biblical. There's a yelp. A groan. A shuffling. Someone curses in a dialect you don't recognize but understand deeply in your soul. You clutch your blanket like a prayer and stare at the rafters. One of them creaks ominously, as if it, too, is judging the situation. Eventually, the chaos dies down. The room settles. The smell does not. You close your eyes again. Just a few more hours until the rooster crows. You can make it. Maybe. Probably. Unless you have to pee again. Darkness in a medieval castle is not like modern darkness. It's not dim. It's not cozy. It's not mood lighting. It's total. You wake up, again, unsure whether it's been minutes or hours. The room around you feels like it's vanished, swallowed by a kind of thick blackness that presses against your eyes even when they're open. There's no warm digital glow. No bedside lamp. No flicker of passing headlights. Just you, a few 100 pounds of cold stone, and the knowledge that if something were standing 5 feet away, you'd have no idea until it sneezed. And even then you'd second-guess yourself. The torch that was flickering in the hallway earlier? Burned out. The embers in the hearth? Cold and gray. You could relight it, but then you'd need flint, and tinder, and coordination, and none of those things happen easily at 3 a.m. when you're wrapped in itchy wool and regret. In the Middle Ages, fire was life. Without it, there was no light, no warmth, no sense of security. But fire was also precious. People rationed candles the way we hoard phone battery. Torches weren't just lying around like mood-setting props. They were made of resinous wood and cloth, expensive and messy. Candlelight came from tallow, animal fat, or beeswax if you were rich, and no one was burning beeswax at bedtime unless you were royalty or the candle was a bribe. Even monks, who were up at all hours, limited their use of light. You want to read after dark? Too bad. Learn to memorize your psalter like the rest of them. So you lie there. You listen. The quiet has a texture now, soft scrapes, distant creaks, a slow drip from somewhere that might be a gutter or might be an existential metaphor. You think about the torchbearer who came through earlier. She was probably carrying a rushlight, basically a stick soaked in fat that burns about as long as it takes to overthink your life choices. Some people slept in shifts, keeping one person awake to watch the fire. Others didn't bother. They just huddle close, say a prayer to Saint Agnes, patron saint of don't let the castle burn down, and hope. Historians still argue whether most castle dwellers feared fire more than they feared bandits. Both could ruin your night. Only one could make you wish for better insurance. You shift under your blanket. The itch from earlier is back, but now you can't even see to scratch properly. You manage to kick your foot out from under the covers, and it hits something. Hard. Your breath catches. You freeze. Then a snort. A snuffle. A low, disgruntled grunt. It's the pig dog again. You're relieved. Mostly. Except that you're now uncomfortably aware of its warm breath fogging in your direction and the sound of it licking something. Probably itself. Hopefully. You roll over, blindly, and stare into the dark. They say your other senses sharpen when vision is gone. Which is great in theory, but in practice, all it means is you now hear everything. The squires wheeze 2 mats over. A drip near the window. The long, slow crack of cooling timber in the ceiling above. The occasional tap-tap that could be mice, or ghosts, or, God forbid, one of the kitchen cats with a grudge. You let your imagination run for a moment. Someone did mention earlier that Lady Rowena once cursed this room. Something about a jilted engagement and a misplaced roast goose. You dismissed it at the time, but now, in this perfect silence, with no light and no clear exit, it seems plausible. Quirky fact: medieval people didn't just believe in ghosts. They built entire nightly routines around not angering them. Shoes facing the right way. Beds oriented east. Whispers before sleep to the kindly ones. Some even slept with iron under the mattress to ward off spirits, or at least blamed the insomnia on something poetic. You try closing your eyes. You think about fire again. How even the smallest candle would cast huge, flickering shadows on the wall, shadows that could look like anything. A hooded figure. A hand. A door opening that wasn't there before. People say darkness is the absence of light. But in a medieval castle, darkness feels like something added, thick, ancient, and not entirely empty. You pull your blanket up to your chin. Tomorrow, you tell yourself. Tomorrow you'll ask for a better sleeping spot. Closer to the hearth. Maybe in the buttery. Maybe even in the stable. Horses at least breathe in comforting, sleepy ways. But for now, you listen to the drip. You listen to the snore. And you try, desperately, to forget that the dark isn't always alone. You don't so much fall asleep as black out in protest. Your body eventually gives up, not because it's comfortable, but because it can't bear to be awake anymore. The fleas are winning, the blanket's too short, and you've officially identified no fewer than 3 draft sources all attacking different parts of your anatomy. But just as your breath starts to even out, clang. Not again. Somewhere above, a bell tolls. It's not the dawn bell. You're nowhere near morning yet. This is the watch bell, a signal that the night guard is changing shifts, and everyone within earshot should either wake up, shut up, or prepare for bad news. The sound bounces off the stone walls like a cold slap. You crack when I open. No light. No movement. Just a long, echoing reverberation that feels like it's being directed personally at your soul. You weren't alone in jolting awake. The old man too mats over gasps audibly and then mutters a prayer so fast it sounds like he's choking on Latin. The pig dog whines. Somewhere outside the room, heavy boots begin their slow patrol over the flagstones. You pull the blanket tighter, not for warmth now, but for comfort. Because someone else is awake. Armed. And walking. That shouldn't be terrifying, but it is. In a castle, the night guard isn't just there to keep peace. They're the castle's living alarm system. A fire starts? They're the first responders. An intruder breaches the outer gate? They raise the alarm. A nobleman's chamber is visited by a suspicious shadow? They're expected to investigate. Or at least loudly announce they're going to fetch someone. But here's the fun part. They're also probably exhausted. Being on night watch was a miserable, thankless job. Guards rotated shifts, often every few hours, and had to stay alert in freezing conditions, while carrying heavy weapons and wearing enough armor to trigger back problems by age 23. And let's not forget the terrifying superstition buffet they were up against. Historians still argue whether guards were more likely to report actual threats or visions of demons, witches, or headless knights wandering the battlements. When you spend 8 hours in the dark listening to wine moan through arrow loops, your brain starts freelancing. You hear the footsteps pause. Somewhere close. Maybe the hallway. Maybe the landing above. There's a shuffle. A cough. The unmistakable sound of chain mail adjusting. Then nothing. Silence again. You start mentally running down your list of castle night priorities. You're not royalty, so no one's guarding your door specifically. You're not sleeping near the kitchen, so no one's stealing pies above your head. You're not near the chapel, where at least one nun reportedly saw a figure made of fog last winter and swore off garlic since. But still, you don't like the quiet. You imagine the guard's torch flickering across empty halls. Shadows stretching impossibly long. That moment when he passes a tapestry and swears it moved, but it didn't. Did it? Quirky detail. Some medieval guards carried bells or clappers and were required to shout the hour as they patrolled. Not just to prove they were awake, but to scare off any evil that might be lurking. A sort of auditory perimeter fence made of sheer volume and sleepy confidence. You kind of wish someone would shout now. Instead, you get a second bell. 2 tolls. The pig dog groans like it's had enough. You sympathize deeply. You roll over, trying to bury your face against your scratchy blanket and block out the sound. But once the bell rings, your mind goes racing. You think about castle sieges, poison plots, the weird cold spot near the chapel. You remember the gossip earlier about the woman who swore she saw a cloaked figure outside the latrine 2 nights ago, hovering. Or maybe that was just Ralph. Ralph always wears his cloak, even indoors. Still, the bell has cracked something open in your brain, and sleep slips further away with every tick of imagination. You listen to the slow fade of armored footsteps. The faint clang of a gate being tested. A muttered conversation 2 floors below, probably just guards swapping stories, Or maybe drawing straws for who gets to carry the oil lamp on the next round. You try not to wonder whether they heard something. You try not to care. You count your breaths. You scratch your elbow. You tell yourself the bell means safety. And if that doesn't work, you remind yourself. Eventually, even the guards go back to sleep. Hey guys. How's your day going? If it's been a great one, drop a number 1 in the comments to spread some positive energy. And if things haven't felt quite right, drop a number 2, because you're not alone. I'm here with you, walking this journey together, so that each moment ahead feels a little lighter, a little more peaceful. You're just drifting again, mind numb, eyelids heavy, when a sharp clink interrupts your almost sleep. It's not loud, not urgent. Just faint metal on stone. Rhythmic. Familiar, in the way that makes your stomach twist slightly. You know that sound. It's rats. They've found something in the pantry again. The noise is coming from below. Maybe the storeroom beneath the buttery, or the grain bins off the kitchen. Somewhere behind walls you'll never fully understand, in corridors that twist like a drunk monk's thoughts, the castle's least charming residents are having a midnight snack. You sigh into your blanket. In castles, rats are inevitable. Like damp. Like rumors. Like that one guy who always pretends he's part of the nobility even though his boots scream otherwise. Rats were everywhere. Between the walls. In the rafters. Beneath the floorboards. And definitely in the pantry, where they could gnaw through wooden barrels, linen sacks, and even leather if desperate enough. Which, let's face it, they always were. Historians still argue whether rats or human error contributed more to medieval food shortages. And honestly, the rats are probably winning the PR battle, because they at least worked in teams. You hear another scuffle. Then a small thump. That's a potato, maybe. Or a turnip. Or a wheel of cheese meeting its untimely demise. There's a low growl beside you. The pig dog has heard it too. It rises slowly, paws patting across the stone in that exaggerated cartoon tiptoe that somehow manages to sound terrifying. You see its silhouette move toward the doorway, tail up, snout twitching. It's time for the nightly patrol. Because in the grand chessboard of castle life, cats and dogs were your pest control team. You didn't have mousetraps. You had fur and fangs. And most castles had a whole menagerie of semi-wild, semi-worshipped animals whose main purpose was to keep the rat population under something vaguely resembling control. Some households kept cats. Specifically in storerooms, often named things like Mischief Pudding, or Saint Geraldine the Vermin Slayer. Others trained small dogs, terriers and mutt mixes, to sniff out nests. That pig dog currently disappearing into the hallway? He's either about to earn his keep or contribute to the problem by knocking something expensive over. Quirky fact, in some parts of Europe, castle cats were even commemorated in stained glass or carvings. Tiny fuzzy sentinels frozen mid-pounce, usually near depictions of grain storage. That's right. They made cat fan art in stone. Priorities. You lie still, ears tuned to the drama unfolding downstairs. There's a yelp. A squeal. Something scurries. Something smashes. Then silence. A few moments later, the pig dog returns, panting heavily, tail wagging, carrying something unrecognizable in its mouth. You choose not to engage. You pretend to be asleep. Let this night have some boundaries. You shift slightly. A flea thanks you. You try to remember what you ate earlier. A bit of hard bread. Possibly pigeon. Possibly rat posing as pigeon. It all tastes the same when boiled beyond recognition. You wonder if the rats ever eat what the humans eat, or if they have better taste. There's a noise in the rafters. You tilt your head and see it. Two glinting eyes, reflecting the moonlight like twin curses. A cat watching. Waiting. Judging. Possibly planning a revolution. You salute it silently and roll back over. In truth, rats weren't just an annoyance. They were a fact of life. They chewed through anything. They carried fleas. They made noise. And yet, somehow, people learned to live with them. The line between pest and pet was always a little blurry in the Middle Ages. especially when pets also ate the pests. You think of the lords in the Great Hall, sleeping on featherbeds with velvet pillows. But guess what? They have rats too. Bigger ones, probably. Nobler lineage. Your blanket shifts slightly. You're not sure if that was you or something else. You don't check. Instead, you whisper to the ceiling. Good luck, Saint Gertrude. Patron saint of cats and rodent control, if you're wondering. You try once more to fall asleep. Beneath the rats. Beside the pig dog. Inside the cold stone belly of a castle that never really sleeps. You wake to the sound of a grown man snoring in Gregorian chant. Not melodically. Not on purpose. But with such rhythmic, syllable-perfect rise and fall that for one confusing second, you think the monastery bells have come to collect you. Nope. Just another sleepless night in the Great Hall. You'd hoped for better. The rumor was that sleeping in the Great Hall meant warmth, proximity to the hearth, higher ceilings for airflow, and maybe even a leftover pie crust someone forgot to guard. But no one mentioned the choir of humanity that comes with it. Because in the castle's largest room, the literal heart of the keep, you are not alone. Ever. The nobles have gone to bed. The torches have burned out. But the Great Hall? Still pulsing with life. A handful of servants lie rolled in cloaks on the benches. A stable boy curled behind a barrel. A cook's assistant snoring with her face squashed against a stool. And in the middle of it all, you. Shivering, blanket-bound, tucked between a tapestry of King Alfred and someone's unwashed boots. Communal sleeping sounds charming in theory, cozy even. Safety in numbers. Body heat. All that. But medieval group sleep is a sensory assault. Let's break it down. Sight. Total darkness, interrupted only by occasional flashes from the dying hearth. You see shapes, outlines. Someone moves in their sleep and it looks, for half a second, like they're rising from the dead. Smell, equal parts old cabbage, wet wool, feet, unbrushed teeth, candle wax, and possibly squirrel. Sound, snoring. Coughing. Muffled talking. A belch. A whispered prayer. Someone muttering in French. Someone else muttering about the person muttering in French. The general ambience of a badly mixed medieval podcast you didn't subscribe to. Historians still argue whether most castle dwellers slept through the night or practiced segmented sleep. Two distinct sleep periods interrupted by a couple of hours of quiet wakefulness. Honestly, when you're sharing a room with 12 people and one chicken, she's in the corner, don't ask, you're not getting a full REM cycle anyway. You shift your blanket. Someone sneezes with dramatic flair. Someone else says, "Bless you," half asleep. Another voice, dry and irritated. "It wasn't me." Then silence again. Quirky fact. Some people deliberately chose to sleep in the Great Hall. Not just servants, guests, travelers, even minor nobility if the guest chambers were full or being repaired due to mold, hauntings, or a spontaneous hole in the ceiling. It was considered safer than the courtyard, warmer than the tower, and only slightly less cursed than the dungeon. You sit up, squinting toward the hearth. There's just enough glow to see someone's hair steaming gently. He's clearly found the warmest spot and isn't sharing. You think about moving closer, then remember the squire who claimed that spot last week woke up with a blistered foot and dreams he swore came from the other side of the veil. You stay put. You glance up at the ceiling beams, imagining the feast that happened here just hours ago, boar on spits, laughter, a bard with questionable taste in lyrics. Now it's just breath and blankets, and the occasional rat checking for crumbs. You lie back down. You try to get comfortable. But one person's twitchy dreams keep nudging your feet. Another keeps pulling the shared blanket, yes, you're sharing a blanket, further toward herself. The chicken gives a low, judgmental cluck and tucks her head under her wing like she's seen enough. And yet, somehow, despite the discomfort, the sounds, and the sense that your dignity has curled up and left, you start to drift. Maybe it's the warmth of nearby bodies. Maybe it's the exhaustion finally catching up. Or maybe, deep down, some ancient part of your brain finds comfort in this strange, noisy group cocoon. You sigh. And as you fade, someone nearby murmurs, If you snore again, I swear by St. Cuthbert I'll smother you with this turnip sack. Just another peaceful night in the great hall. You don't mean to wake up, but you do. Not because of a sound. Not because of a draft. But because something feels off. Your skin prickles. The hair on your arms lifts gently, like it's listening. The room is quiet now. Too quiet. No snoring. No rustling. Even the chicken has fallen into a suspiciously intense silence. You open your eyes, just a sliver. And there, across the darkened great hall, beside the chapel door, you see it. A flicker. Not firelight. Not a torch. Something paler. Bluer. Like moonlight filtered through water. It pulses once. Twice. Then fades. You blink hard. Nothing. Now, to be clear, you don't believe in ghosts. Not seriously. Not in the way that makes you whisper to shadows or avoid mirrors after midnight. But also, you're not an idiot. Because this is a medieval castle. And medieval castles, by design, are cursed geometry. Long corridors. Secret stairs. Cold stone soaked in centuries of secrets. Historians still argue whether the belief in hauntings was a product of cultural imagination or simply a rational response to sleeping in literal dungeons. Either way, something just shimmered near the chapel door. You sit up slowly. Blanket around your shoulders. You glance around. None of your sleeping companions have stirred. The man next to you is breathing in steady huffs. The pig dog is twitching in its dreams. The chicken remains unnaturally quiet, which may be the most unsettling part of all. You listen. Nothing. Except... wait. Chains? Not a lot. Just the faintest clink of metal. You know that sound too, because the guard's chainmail earlier clattered in that same hollow, metallic rhythm. But this? This is slower. More deliberate. Like someone walking carefully across stone, dragging something behind them. You look again. The flicker is back. Same spot. Just near the chapel door. And this time, you're sure you see a figure, vague, indistinct, like a smudge on a painting. Broad shoulders. Something like a cloak. You catch a flash of silver where a sword hilt might be. Then, just like that, it vanishes. You lie back down. Because what else are you going to do? You're not going over there. You're not investigating. You're not one of those people. The chapel has been acting weird since the solstice anyway. Someone swore they saw a candle relight itself. Another heard whispering through the altar wall. And then there's the legend of Lord Edmund, the knight who supposedly died during a siege, but was buried with his armor still on, beneath the very stones of that chapel. You dismissed it at the time. But now, well, let's just say it's easier to stay horizontal. Quirky medieval belief. Some castles kept watch candles, lit in holy spaces through the night to ward off restless spirits. Others just left salt lines by the threshold, or tucked herbs into door frames. And if all else failed, they sent in a priest. Or a dog. Sometimes both. You reach into your blanket and touch the small pouch tied to your belt. It holds exactly two things, a coin, for emergencies, and a sprig of dried sage. The kitchen maid gave it to you last week and told you not to ask questions, just keep it close when the moon is fat. You're not arguing with that kind of certainty. You whisper to yourself. Not a prayer. Just a mantra. It's just shadows. It's just a draft. It's just a very dramatic coincidence. And still, you keep your eyes open just a little longer this time. Because sometimes the scariest part of a castle at night isn't the rats. Or the cold. Or the snoring. It's the feeling that you're not the only one awake. You tell yourself it was nothing. The shimmer, the chains, the vague figure in the chapel. Probably just moonlight. Or dust. Or the world's most dramatic moth. But now you're wide awake. Again. And the castle is not going to let you slip back into sleep without dragging you through one more awkward, deeply human part of medieval life. Because someone's whispering. You first hear it behind you, just a gentle murmur, like someone talking in their sleep. You ignore it. Roll over. Count your heartbeats. Then you hear it again, louder. 2 voices. And they're definitely awake. You squint across the great hall and spot them near the gallery stair. 2 silhouettes, huddled close, heads bent together. You can't see details, but you can tell from the posture, from the nervous shifting, from the slight, deliberate hush to their tones, something scandalous is unfolding. And congratulations. You're now a reluctant audience to a medieval secret. This is the thing no one tells you about castle nights. They're full of whispers. Of affairs. Of stolen glances. Of quiet arguments and desperate plans murmured behind columns after dark. Privacy in a castle is a fantasy. Thin walls. Open halls. Servants everywhere. Even the noble chambers have wooden panels that don't fully meet the floor. So when people want to talk, and they really don't want to be overheard, they wait for night. For dark corners. For the hour when even the ghosts are bored. Historians still argue whether castles were truly as scandal-ridden as the chronicles suggest, or if the gossip outpaced the reality. But given that half the love letters from the 13th century survived because someone intercepted them, it's fair to say this wasn't just romantic imagination. Back to the whisperers. They pause, one of them glancing over a shoulder. You freeze and feign sleep like your life depends on it. Maybe it does. Maybe you just overheard something involving stolen wine, or an arranged marriage gone wrong, or someone's very unholy interest in the steward's daughter. You've seen enough soap operas to know this is not your business. You shut your eyes. But now your brain's spinning. Because castle nights were hotbeds of intrigue. Even minor lords had cousins scheming for inheritance. Servants bartered secrets like currency. Spies might pass through disguised as pilgrims. Lovers tryst between barrels in the buttery or exchanged tokens under stairwells. And don't even get started on the troubadours. They were basically medieval gossip columns with lutes. Quirky detail. Some castles kept secret passages not just for defense, but for discretion. Narrow hallways between rooms, low doors behind tapestries, even priest holes used for more than hiding clergy. Some were designed for escape. Others? Rendezvous. Nothing says romance like a damp, torchlit crawlspace. You shift in your spot, straining to hear more. The 2 voices are fading now, footsteps soft against stone. Someone stifles a giggle. There's a whisper of fabric. A kiss, maybe? Or just the squeak of a boot. They're gone. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. You don't know who they were, or what they were whispering about. But in that moment, in that flicker of midnight plotting, you feel strangely grounded. The rats, the cold, the ghosts, those are timeless nuisances. But the secrets? The stolen moments? The whisper-thin line between risk and desire? That's the most human part of castle life you've felt all night. You roll back onto your scratchy mattress. The pig dog grunts. The chicken rustles. And someone, somewhere, is definitely going to regret that hallway rendezvous in the morning. Hey guys. If you enjoyed today's topic, drop a 1 in the comments. If it wasn't quite your thing, hit us with a 2, we're always looking to get better. You're not sure what time it is now. Not that time means much in a castle where the only clock is your bladder, your neighbor's cough, or a distant bell that may or may not have told a real hour. But one thing's certain, it's cold. Again. Or still. Or maybe colder than before. Your feet have turned to medieval ice cubes. You try tucking them under your thighs, into your cloak, into the armpit of your own despair. Nothing works. The blanket, thin and itchy, may as well be a decorative suggestion. You begin to entertain terrible ideas. Like, what if I moved closer to the hearth? Or, would anyone really notice if I stole the wool wrap from the stable boy 2 mats over? Or, and this one's a winner, what if I took one of the fire-heated stones from the embers and tucked it at the bottom of my bed like a peasant space heater? Spoiler, it's a trap. Because yes, medieval folks did use fire-heated objects to warm their beds. Flat stones, iron pans filled with embers, even bricks wrapped in cloth. The idea was simple. You heat the object in the hearth, carefully transfer it, with tongs, ideally, and place it under your bedding to keep your toes from turning into frostbitten stubs. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread among lower classes or more of a noble household indulgence, but references to bed warmers show up in everything from 13th century inventories to church complaints about fire risks. Quirky side note: some people stuffed hot turnips into cloth sacks and slept with those. Seriously. Turnip. Hot. Sleep buddy. Humanity is creative when it's freezing. But back to your current situation. You inch toward the hearth. It's mostly dead now, just a ring of ash and one determined coal. You spot a good-sized stone off to the side. Still warm. You take it, wrap it in a corner of your blanket, and tiptoe back to your mat like a thief in a monastery. It works. Kind of. For 5 minutes your feet rejoice. They sing songs. They remember what joy feels like. And then... bzzzzp. It's not a sound, it's a feeling. A sudden spike of heat through the blanket that makes you jolt. You kick the stone away, and it rolls, of course it rolls, right into the side of someone else's foot. Who threw a rock? Comes a groggy, accusatory grunt. You pretend to be asleep. You even add a fake snore for effect. The stone is retrieved. Possibly repurposed as a weapon. You accept your fate as a failed bed engineer. So now you're back to cold feet. Again. You curl tighter. You press your knees into your chest. You try breathing on your own toes, which mostly results in dizziness and shame. You think about the one guy in the tower chamber with furs and a fireplace, and probably a servant whose only job is to keep the bed warm with hot water and whispered encouragement. You are not that guy. The pig dog sidles closer. You consider offering it joint custody of the blanket in exchange for paw-to-foot heating. The deal is struck without words. Warmth spreads. Hope flickers. You think about how something as simple as warm feet can feel like a luxury in a castle. About how people survived winters without central heat. How frost crept across stone walls and left breath-fogged trails that lingered like ghosts. And how, somehow, they kept going. Because there's no thermostat here. No electric blanket. Just a fire, a stone, a turnip, or, if you're lucky, a pig dog with a kind disposition. You close your eyes again. You dream of summer. You dream of socks. You dream of never waking up in the middle of the night wondering if your toes are still attached. You must have drifted off for a bit, because the next thing you hear is the bell. Again. But this one's different. It's softer, higher, more distant, like it's not just marking time, but thinning it. One long, trembling note that rolls through the corridor like a breath held too long. You're not sure what hour it is. Historians still argue how medieval timekeeping actually worked, but it doesn't matter. Because this bell? This is the witching hour. You feel it. Not in your ears, but your spine. The air gets heavier. Not colder, exactly, but quieter. Like the castle is holding its breath. Around you, the great hall is mostly still. A few people shift under their cloaks. Someone coughs, once, like punctuation. The fire is just a memory now. Even the pig dog, who has spent most of the night chasing phantom vermin and passing deeply judgmental gas, is curled up and motionless. You sit up slowly. And you notice it, something outside. Through the narrow slit of a window, beyond the heavy shutters and frost-rimmed glass. A strange brightness. The moon. So full it looks like it could burst. Hung low in the sky like a white coin, glinting off every damp edge of the courtyard. You can see the outlines of turrets. The black teeth of the battlements. And something else, movement. Not fast. Not loud. Just a shadow. You blink. It's gone. You lie back down and tell yourself it was just a patrol. Or a cat. Or an overly ambitious cloak caught in the wind. You stare up at the timbered ceiling. Because here's the thing, in the medieval world, night had rules. There were hours for prayer. Hours for watch. Hours for rest. And then there was this hour, the one no one talked about directly but everyone felt. The one where saints were asleep, the guard was blinking too hard, and the world tilted just slightly off-center. It's the hour when dreams go weird. When wolves howl for no reason. When someone hears a knock at a door that hasn't been used in years. You remember a story someone told at supper. About a knight who got up to relieve himself one night and came back hours later, barefoot and trembling, claiming he'd followed a music that led him to the edge of the woods, where the trees whispered in French and something tried to braid his hair. You'd laughed. But now, you find your fingers touching the ends of your own hair, just to check. Quirky medieval belief, many people carried small charms or amulets at night, not just for luck, but as wards. A pressed flower. A carved bone. A scrap of holy text tied to a string. One woman in Wales reportedly slept with a bit of iron chain under her pillow for protection from dream walkers. Whether those were spirits or jealous neighbors was left vague. You feel the shape of your sage sprig again, tucked under your belt. Still there. You close your eyes. And then you hear it. A voice. Faint. Too soft to make out. Not angry. Not afraid. Just singing. It could be the wind. But it isn't. It weaves between the stone walls and through the tapestries like it's looking for something. A tune with no words. A melody that feels like it remembers you. Or almost does. You clutch the blanket tighter. You tell yourself it's nothing. You whisper to the pig dog, who does not respond. Betrayer. You count backwards from 10. You try to recall what someone said about Saint Eligius, that he guards against night terrors and leg cramps alike. You hope that's true. Your calves are twitching and your brain is convinced a 14th century bard ghost is about to ask for an encore. And then, just as quickly it stops. The song. The light. The strange tension in the air. Gone. The bell tolls again, one soft note. And the castle exhales. You're not sure how long you've been lying there. But when you open your eyes again, dawn is still a rumor and the night is still heavy. But you, somehow, are still here. Still cold. Still itchy. Still surviving. You wake up tangled in your own blanket like a medieval burrito of regret. It's morning-ish. Not sunrise, but something in the air has shifted. A faint blue light filters through the slits in the stone wall. Someone somewhere has stirred a fire. You smell smoke, peat, and something that might generously be called porridge, though wet sadness is more accurate. And your first thought? You're still wearing all your clothes. Because of course you are. In a medieval castle, the idea of changing into pajamas is laughable. Unless you're nobility, and even they kept things pretty utilitarian. The sumptuary laws, those endless rules about who could wear what, applied even at night. Heaven forbid a yeoman be caught wearing silk to bed. You push yourself upright and feel the stiffness in your back. Your neck crackles like old parchment. And as your foot swings off the straw mat and hits the icy stone floor, you remember the tragic truth. Nightshirts were optional. Frostbite was not. If you're rich, you might have a linen nightgown, soft, loose-fitting, breathable. If you're royalty, that nightgown might be embroidered, or even fur-lined, because why not flex while unconscious? But most people? They slept in their day clothes. Or parts of them. Or, occasionally, less, but only if they had the fire to make it survivable. Historians still argue whether sleeping nude was taboo or just practical. Some suggest it was common among married couples. Others think it was reserved for heatwaves and people with an unusually high pain tolerance for morning breezes. Tonight you opted for full armor. Okay, not literally, but close. Tunic, hose, underchemise, double-layered wool cloak, and socks that could technically qualify as relics. You slept in it all. And now, every seam has left an imprint. You look like you were pressed between two slabs of wood and regret. You glance around. The stable boy next to you has one leg out of his blanket and is shivering like a leaf in a wind tunnel. The woman on your other side has her shawl over her head like a hood of invisibility. Across the hall, a nobleman's page is waking up while still holding his master's boots, as if he fell asleep mid-task and dreamt of escape. And then there's the squire. He's wearing something that should be illegal in 3 counties, a half-buttoned shirt made of what might be velvet, hose in 2 different colors, and a cap so absurdly plumed it could scare birds in 3 regions. You stare. He notices. He shrugs. As for dreams, he mumbles. Good ones. You're not convinced, but you respect the confidence. Because honestly, medieval bedtime fashion was a mess. The nobility were all over the place. Some slept in robes so rich you'd assume they were attending a coronation in their dreams. Others stripped down to nothing but linen underclothes and a smug sense of superiority. There are records of queens wearing veils and jewelry to bed, just in case they died in their sleep and wanted to look appropriate for the afterlife. You've got hay in your hair and a blanket that smells like goat. You win some, you lose some. Quirky detail. In some regions, people believed your night clothes could affect your dreams. A sprig of lavender sewn into the collar meant peaceful sleep. An embroidered cross? Protection. A red stitch over the heart? That one's murkier. Possibly a love charm. Possibly warding off vampires. You check your own collar. No lavender. No embroidery. Just a suspicious grease stain you choose not to examine further. You stretch, immediately regret it, and pull your cloak tighter. The hall is beginning to hum with life now. Quiet conversation. A cough. The scrape of someone dragging a chair. The first echoes of morning activity moving like a tide through the keep. You survived the night. Barely. You're itchy, stiff, and mildly traumatized. But you didn't freeze. You didn't get possessed by Lord Edmund. And you didn't fall face first into the chamber pot. That's called winning. You push your hair out of your face and start to rise, just as someone at the far end of the hall trips over a chambermaid's bucket and lets out a sound that's somewhere between a shriek and a Gregorian chant. The castle, it seems, is awake. And so are you. You shuffle down the narrow stairs still half wrapped in your cloak, knees cracking like a poorly made drawbridge. Your destination is unclear. Maybe breakfast. Maybe warmth. Maybe just a place where nobody snores in your ear or threatens to spoon you for body heat. You pass a servant with a tray of soot-black mugs, morning pottage and something they're calling ale for the nerves. You nod in solidarity. She nods back with the same dead-eyed look of someone who's heard 3 different ghost stories before sunrise. But before you can escape fully into the main hall, you hear it. The snore. It echoes down from above, bouncing off every timber and stone like a war horn played through a nose. You know that snore. Everyone does. It belongs to the noble upstairs. A man with a feather bed, fur pelts, a private hearth, and the respiratory system of a wounded walrus. His room is directly above the south corner of the hall, and when he sleeps, the entire keep knows. Last week, someone claimed his snore changed pitch with the phases of the moon. Another swore it once synced perfectly with the chapel bell and caused a monk to faint from divine confusion. You lean against the wall and listen. It starts low, like a throat clearing. Then it builds, a dragging inhale, a short pause, and a thunderous, buzzing exhale that rattles the ceiling beam above you. You glance up. Dust drifts down from the rafters. Someone's prayer candle flickers dramatically. He's at it again. See, while you spent the night fighting off fleas and snuggling with a morally ambiguous pig dog, Lord Weaselthorpe, or whatever his name is, slept in luxury. Rich nobles and castles had their own chambers, with featherbeds, bolsters, that's a fancy pillow, and canopies to block out drafts. But even money can't buy peace if your nose collapses like a cheap market tent every time you breathe in. Historians still argue whether medieval snoring was considered a medical issue or just another unfortunate byproduct of being a person with a neck. Some treatises blamed melancholy humors for disrupted breathing. Others advised sleeping upright, wearing a clay charm around your throat, or drinking herbal vinegar before bed. None of that helped Lord Weasel, apparently. Quirky tidbit? In one 15th century text, a physician suggests that snorting breathers should sleep facing east, with a small pebble sewn into their collar to remind the spirit not to wander. That might explain why the noble's valet was seen muttering angrily over his laundry yesterday. You step into the great hall and glance upward toward his window. The shutters are open just enough to let out sound, and possibly an entire colony of annoyed spirits. The pig dog whines. A knight seated near the fire looks up at the ceiling and mutters. He dreams of dragons again. You smirk. Because when it comes to castle living, no one escapes the noble snorer. He's part of the soundtrack. Right between the guard's midnight bell and the rat who plays tag with your sanity at dawn. And worst of all, when he does wake up, he claims he slept terribly. Of course he did. On a pillow stuffed with swan feathers under a bearskin, while half the keep plotted his assassination via ear stuffing. You tear a hunk of bread from a shared loaf and slump onto a bench. The bench creaks. Everything creaks. You stare into the hearth and let the warmth lick your boots while the snoring upstairs hits a new octave, one so intense it causes a serving spoon to vibrate. A young page nearby closes his eyes and whispers, "If he dies in his sleep, I want the boots." You nod slowly. It's going to be a long day. But at least you've already made peace with one thing. Tonight, you're sleeping in the stables. With the horses. And hopefully fewer nasal symphonies. Later that day, after a breakfast that tastes suspiciously like regret reheated over ashes, you find yourself near the arrow slits of the outer wall, staring out into the morning fog. You're not on duty. You're not even supposed to be up here. But sometimes, after a night like that, you just need air that hasn't been breathed 6 times by 6 different people, 2 rats, and a possibly haunted chicken. The wind bites your face, sharp and sudden. Your eyes water. And that's when you notice it. The moat. Still, dark, and far less picturesque than the storybooks promised. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't reflect the castle majestically. It just sort of sits there, a murky trench of sludge, weeds, and ancient secrets. And something just sloshed. You freeze. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't your imagination. There was movement down there. A ripple. A thunk. A shape that bobbed for a second and then disappeared beneath the surface like it had a schedule to keep. You lean forward carefully. The stone is slick with moss and rain. Below, the moat curls around the castle like a tired snake. The reeds sway. The water ripples again. Castles had moats for defense, yes, but not like the cartoons suggest. Most moats weren't filled with crocodiles or sharks or anything exciting. Just water, sometimes only waist deep, used to make tunneling harder, slow down attackers, and create a general vibe of don't even think about it. But here's the thing, they also became the castle's dumping ground. Food scraps. Wastewater. Sometimes worse. The garderobe, that vertical toilet chute you definitely remember from earlier, emptied straight into it. Which means what you're looking at right now isn't just a moat. It's a medieval stew. Historians still debate just how foul moat water really got, but there's one undeniable truth. No one swam in it. Not twice, anyway. You scan the surface again. And just when you think it's settled, you spot it. A pale, slim shape. Thin. Angular. Just under the water, moving slowly toward the wall. Is it an eel? A cloth? Plop. Gone again. You back away from the slit and tug your cloak tighter. You want to believe it was nothing. A log. A fish. A particularly athletic turnip. But deep down, something about the movement felt intentional. You head back inside. The corridor smells like damp limestone and boiled onions. 2 guards pass you laughing. One makes a face and says, "Moat's acting up again." You want to ask what that means, but you don't. Some questions are just better left on the far side of the drawbridge. Quirky castle fact. There were rumors, never confirmed, of prisoners tossed into moats for punishment. Not executions. Just time-outs. Let them stew for a few hours, literally. One French noble allegedly called it bathing the ungrateful. If that's not nightmare fuel, you don't know what is. Back in the hall, the squire is snoring against a pillar with oat mush crusted in his hair. The pig dog is chewing a leather boot that may or may not still belong to someone. You slump down onto a bench and try to forget the ripple in the water. Because the castle's full of noises. Creaks. Footsteps. Chains. Bells. But what lies outside, in the moat, in the woods, in the fog, sometimes creeps in through those arrow slits when no one's looking. You sip a weak ale and try to focus on the fire. Tomorrow night, you tell yourself, you'll sleep better. You'll find a warmer spot. You'll bring dried herbs. You'll ignore the moat entirely. But for now, you make one silent, unspoken promise to yourself. Never drop anything valuable out the window. Because there's no way you're going down there to get it. You're back in the chapel by nightfall, not by choice, but because someone got bumped from their corner near the hearth by a merchant's cousin with noble blood and a persistent cough. So now you've been relocated here, to the one part of the castle that somehow manages to be colder on the inside than it is outdoors. Stone walls. Stone floor. Stone everything. It's like sleeping in a decorative tomb. There's a single iron candelabrum in the corner, barely lit, casting long, twitchy shadows across the worn altar and the faded tapestries of saints with disappointed expressions. You lay your blanket down carefully. The floor has a slope. You're pretty sure you're going to wake up halfway under a pew. Someone across the room is already kneeling, mumbling prayers under their breath, fingers tied around a wooden rosary. You admire the dedication. You also quietly wonder if they're praying for protection or forgiveness. Because nighttime in a castle chapel has a very particular kind of energy. The kind that makes your heart beat slower. That makes you whisper, even when you're alone. The kind that makes you believe, just for a moment, that the air itself is listening. You lie back on your cloak and stare at the ceiling ribs stretching into darkness. And you do what almost everyone in a medieval castle did after sundown, you pray. Or at least you try. Because let's be honest, whether you're deeply religious or just terrified of the draft near the altar, you're looking for something to help you survive the night. Historians still debate whether nightly prayer was a spiritual practice or a coping mechanism. Probably both. Monks and clergy had structured devotions, matins, lauds, the whole lineup. But even ordinary folk developed bedtime rituals, charms, whispered litanies, appeals to saints with very specific job descriptions. Tonight you go with Saint Eligius, patron saint of blacksmiths, metalworkers, and, according to local lore, leg cramps. Because after sleeping on a slopestone floor wrapped in wool and bad decisions, you're going to need him. You whisper his name. Twice, just to be safe. Then you throw in a quick nod to Saint Barbara, patron saint of sudden disasters and mysterious thumps in the rafters. The candelabrum flickers. You tell yourself it's just the wind. Quirky fact, medieval folks believed certain saints were more active on particular nights. Fridays were for Saint Michael, Mondays for Saint Agnes, and full moons. Let's just say everyone got involved. There were even saints for protection from bad dreams, like Saint Raphael, the ultimate celestial sleep aid. You're drifting now. The chapel is quiet. The prayers have faded into whispers. The cold bites your nose, but somehow, it's less sharp than before. Maybe the stone warmed under your body. Maybe the saints are cutting you some slack. And just as your thoughts begin to slip into half-sleep, tap. You freeze. Not a big noise. Just a soft tap. Then another. Then one more. You open your eyes. The candlelight wavers again. The shadows on the wall stretch. Someone shifts in their sleep. And then, tap tap tap, from the far end of the chapel, behind the altar curtain. You sit up. The person with the rosary hasn't moved. The pig dog, who followed you, bless him, is sound asleep, curled at your feet like a small, vaguely judgmental rug. But you are now extremely, fully, alarmingly awake. Because the last time you heard that noise, it was a mouse behind a barrel. This is not a mouse. It's deliberate. It's slow. It's almost polite. You stare at the curtain. You whisper a final prayer. To all the saints. Alphabetically. And then you lie back down. Because chapel or no chapel, saint or no saint, you are not going behind that curtain. Not for coin. Not for bread. Not even for a feather bed and 3 warm turnips. You tuck your cloak up to your ears. You squeeze your eyes shut. And you wait. Eventually, the tapping stops. The candle burns out. And the chapel returns to silence. Almost. Because just before sleep finally claims you, you hear it again. Just one soft sound, barely audible, like the turning of a page in the dark. Maybe it was a prayer book. Maybe it was something older. You don't ask. Some things in a castle are best left in the shadows. The wind arrives around midnight, uninvited and deeply dramatic. It slips through the cracks in the shutters and howls like a banshee with a flair for performance. Somewhere outside, a weathercock screams in protest, creaking back and forth as though it's trying to fly off the turret and start a new life somewhere less windy. You wake up because of it. Or maybe you were already awake. It's hard to tell anymore. Castle sleep is more of a negotiation than a biological function. You sit up slowly. The pig dog lets out a grunt from the base of the pew and stretches, completely unfazed by the airborne apocalypse rattling the roof overhead. And you? You're freezing. Again. You drag the cloak tighter. It does nothing. Then, howl. A gust bursts through the arrow slit like it's trying to prove a point. The tapestry on the back wall lifts, flutters, and drops with a sigh. Dust spirals. You swear the stone beneath you just shifted an inch. This is not a gentle breeze. This is wind with intent. In medieval castles, the architecture was all about strength and intimidation, but no one thought to make it cozy. The same arrow slits that let archers rain death upon invaders now allowed drafts to attack your kidneys. The high ceilings meant smoke could rise. And so could cold air. Every window, every corridor, every stairwell acts like a wind tunnel designed by someone who hated your comfort. Historians still argue whether castle designers considered internal warmth a priority or simply decided everyone would adapt, or perish quietly beneath a sheepskin. The evidence suggests perish quietly was winning. You lie back down and stare up at the rafters, which creak now with every gust. Above you, the keep's tallest tower stands like a stone chimney, swallowing the sky. You picture it swaying, just slightly. You know it's solid. You know it's held firm for centuries. You still imagine it collapsing directly onto your face. That's the thing about wind in a castle. It's not just a sound, it's a presence. It presses against the walls. It hisses through gaps in the stone. It moans down hallways like someone muttering from 2 rooms away. And once your brain's in that space, everything becomes suspicious. A thump behind the wall? Probably just the shutters banging. A creak in the beam? Old wood settling. That low whisper? The one right behind your ear? Yeah, definitely wind. Quirky fact. Some people believe the wind carry voices from the dead. Not always ghosts. Sometimes angels, sometimes demons, sometimes just unhappy ancestors. That's why certain windows were sealed with wax during storms, or lined with herbs like yarrow and mint to ward off unwanted conversations. You wish you had mint. You wish you had anything that could stop the window near your head from shrieking like a haunted goose. You throw a shoe at it. It doesn't help. You pull the blanket over your head and tell yourself stories. The kind your grandmother might have told, about wind sprites, about clever girls who outwitted storm spirits, about old monks who could quiet the night with one verse. You try humming a hymn. You get halfway through the first line before the wind punches the shutter open with a bang that makes you leap a foot in the air and shout something that sounds suspiciously like a hymn's angry cousin. You stumble to your feet, cloak tangled around your knees, and relatch the window with numb fingers. Outside, the trees are thrashing, and something, a weathercock you assume, is spinning like it's auditioning for sainthood. You seal the latch with a loose bit of cloth, shove the tapestry against the frame, and back away slowly like you've just bribed a dragon. Then you slump to the floor, exhausted. Your nose is cold. Your toes are numb. The pig dog is now sleeping on half your blanket. But the wind, for the moment, is quiet. The rafters groan. The candles flutter. And somewhere, far away in the castle's highest tower, the weathercock lets out one final squeal, as if to say, "Good luck sleeping now." You dream you're floating. Then you wake and realize it's your featherbed. Except you don't have a featherbed, which means you're floating on something else. You bolt upright, and immediately regret it. Because now you're not just cold. You're itchy. Not metaphorically. Not, "Ha, castle life, am I right?" Itchy. But furiously, indignantly, spiritually itchy. It starts with your forearm. Then your thigh. Then both ankles. You scratch like a raccoon trapped in a burlap sack. The pig dog wakes up, blinks at you, and relocates with a sigh that somehow conveys disappointment. You peel back your blanket and see them. Tiny black specks. Jumping. Biting. Celebrating your entire existence like it's a buffet. Fleas. In the featherbeds. Now, let's be honest, you weren't expecting spa-level hygiene in a medieval castle. But you were kind of hoping the itchiness would stay metaphorical. You certainly didn't expect to be playing host to a pop-up flea festival. And the worst part? This isn't just your problem. It's everyone's. Fleas didn't discriminate. Highborn, lowborn. No-born. If you had blood and warmth, you were eligible. Featherbeds? Fancy. Comfortable. And basically 5-star resorts for fleas. Historians still argue whether featherbeds were worth it. Rich folks adored them, soft, fluffy, stuffed with goose or swan down, sewn into thick linen or velvet covers. But those same lovely feathers created the perfect hideout for biting insects. Even with regular beating and airing, infestations were common. There's a reason. Airing the bedding became a daily ritual. Castle staff would drag mattresses out to the courtyard, hang blankets over walls, beat the stuffing out of them, literally. And yet, the fleas always returned. Quirky fact? Some people tried lining their beds with dried mint, rosemary, or lavender to repel pests. Others burned incense. One nobleman allegedly had his mattress smoked over a slow fire every fortnight. Because what better way to enjoy a nap than on a lightly roasted duvet? You stagger to your feet, frantically shaking your blanket like it owes you money. A flea launches itself into the air and lands, naturally, on your face. You slap yourself. The pig dog is now on the opposite side of the chapel, watching you with deep concern. You whisper a curse under your breath and strip off your overshirt, hoping to shake out the worst of it. It doesn't help. You are now just shirtless, cold, and still itchy. You hear shuffling in the corner. Another figure sits up, a cook's apprentice, by the look of her. She scratches her scalp violently and mutters, "They got me too." You make eye contact. No words are exchanged. Just a mutual understanding. Tonight, we all lose. You pace in slow circles, trying not to touch anything. Your skin crawls. You wonder if you'll ever feel clean again. Maybe you'll jump into the moat. Maybe the moat is where the fleas came from. You consider your options. Burn the bedding? Tempting. Sleep standing up? Unlikely. Abandon the castle and become a moss-covered hermit? Genuinely appealing. But then, you remember the kitchen maid. The one with the small cloth pouch. She said it helped. Said if you boiled wormwood and sage into a rinse, it kept the nibblers away. You scoffed at the time. Now you would trade your remaining boot for that recipe. You flop back down, wrap the blanket around you as loosely as possible, and pray the fleas have a curfew. Because tomorrow you're airing this thing out. You're dragging it into the courtyard, beating it within an inch of its life, and asking Saint Hugh, patron of itchy monks, for divine intervention. You scratch one last time. Then close your eyes. It's going to be a long, bumpy journey towards sleep. Every twitch of a blanket. Every whisper of a hair moving on your arm. Every tickle on your skin will feel like a siege. But somehow, through sheer exhaustion, you begin to fade. Fleas and all. You wake up because the tapestry is moving. Not dramatically. Not like in a ghost story where it billows toward you and whispers your name in Latin. Just twitching. A slow, steady shift like someone's brushing against it on the other side. Which would be totally fine, if the tapestry wasn't hanging flat against the solid stone wall. You stare at it. Blink a few times. Try to blame it on wind. But you sealed that shutter hours ago. Tied it shut with your belt, in fact, after the last wind gust tried to redecorate your entire sleeping corner. So the tapestry shouldn't be moving. But it is. You sit up quietly, doing your best not to wake the pig dog, who is now fully cocooned in your blanket and snoring with serene confidence. You envy him. He doesn't care about ghost tapestries, or fleas, or mysterious late-night architectural twitching. You do, though. You rise. Slowly. Carefully. The cold stone bites your feet. The air smells faintly of old incense and someone's abandoned cheese. You take a step closer. The tapestry is old, threadbare in places, heavy with dust. It's a scene of St. George skewering a dragon, though time has worn the dragon down to what looks more like an enthusiastic lizard holding a stick. You stare at the folds near the bottom, watching the shadow ripple again. Then, suddenly, silence. Nothing moves. You poke it. It twitches. You jump back. And that's when you realize it's not just moving. There's space behind it. Your brain goes into overdrive. Secret passage? Hiding place? The start of your very own tragic bard ballad about vanishing before morning bread? See, castles are full of hidden spaces. Small tunnels. Forgotten stairwells. Passages built for servants, or spies, or scandalous escapes. Historians still argue how many of these were practical versus legendary, but plenty have been uncovered over the centuries, many behind tapestries just like this one. Quirky fact? In some noble households, the tapestry wasn't just decoration or insulation, it was the wall. Literally hung to hide doorways. Some even had slits sewn into them so guards or servants could peek out without being seen. Like a medieval two-way mirror, but with more embroidery and judgment. You reach forward again, gingerly lifting the edge. Behind it is exactly what you feared, darkness. Not the soft, blurry darkness of a corner at night, but pitch. Heavy and silent. A tunnel, maybe? Or a very rude hole. You squint. There's a draft coming through. Cold. Musty. Smells like forgotten air and maybe damp rope? It's not the worst thing you've smelled in this castle, but it ranks high. You think about crawling in. You also think about everything you've learned these past few nights. The floors bite. The fleas feast. The wind lies. The ghost of Lord Edmund might still be pacing the chapel. And someone dropped a chamber pot twice. So no, you are not crawling into a mysterious moving tapestry tunnel at 3 a.m. You let the fabric fall. It settles like it never moved at all. You return to your mat, one eye on the tapestry, the other on your own sanity. You tug the corner of your blanket back from the pig dog. He resists but eventually concedes, and lie down again. Your back itches. You ignore it. Because honestly, at this point, if there's something behind that tapestry, you hope it respects the blanket boundary. And if not, you hope it's at least warm. The vultures came first. Not in a rush. Not in a frenzy. Just circling. 3, maybe 4 of them, lazy arcs against the pale blue sky above the northern mesa, where the rocks bake all day and secrets go to dry out. You notice them one afternoon while walking the ridge, quilt square tucked under your arm, looking for thread that matches the color of an old saddle. They're not in a panic. Just curious. Like they're waiting for something to finish decomposing. Word spreads fast in Lint Hollow. By dusk, a small group assembles at the base of the mesa. The mayor with his walking stick, Clara with her field binoculars, Mabel the goat, naturally, and you. You climb. The mesa's steeper than you remember. The wind tugs harder, like it's trying to keep you from reaching whatever the vultures already know. And then, at the summit, you find it. A small circle of stones. Carefully arranged. Too careful to be natural. At the center, a saddle blanket folded with impossible neatness. Next to it, a rusted pair of spurs, laced together with horsehair. And beside those, pressed gently into the dust like an offering, a nightshirt. hand-sewn, blue-gray, frayed at the collar, with a single stitch of red over the heart. The wind hushes. No one speaks. Because you all know what this is. Or rather, what it means. Someone made it through the night. One of those nights. The kind filled with fleas, phantoms, bedbugs, snoring, and things twitching behind tapestries. And somehow, they didn't just survive, they marked the spot. Like a warning. Like a monument. Like someone climbed out of a medieval mattress and said, "Here lies the last sane person to sleep in a castle." And they walked away. Barefoot, probably. The mayor kneels beside the stones. Clara sketches the scene with a practiced hand. Mabel tries to eat the saddle blanket. You sit down beside the offering, the sun warm against your face. You think about the nights you've endured, on stone, under drafts, beside the noble whose nasal passages could summon rain. You think about the itching, the haunting, the pig dog's occasional betrayal. And you laugh. Softly. Deeply. The kind of laugh that comes from someone who knows, deep in their bones, that no bed is truly safe when the roof creaks and the walls whisper. You unfold the quilt square. Match the thread. Begin to sew. Behind you, the vultures wheel away, bored now. Their work here is done. You're back in the castle. Of course you are. You'd hoped last night might be different, warmer, quieter, slightly less cursed, but no. Here you are again, lying flat on a bundle of straw, itchy in 6 different emotional dimensions, listening to someone argue with a chamber pot. And your stomach hurts. Not the "I skipped dinner" kind of hurt. No. This is the "I may have eaten something that wasn't food" kind of hurt. You sit up slowly. The great hall is dark. Again. A single candle sputters near the hearth. Someone across the room groans. And then you remember the mead. You had 1 cup. Maybe 2. It was strong, but not undrinkable. Sweet, sharp, vaguely medicinal. The kind of drink that feels warm going down and deeply suspicious coming back up. Because medieval people? They loved their medicinal beverages. Especially at night. Mead with rosemary for colds. Cider with sage for dreams. Ale steeped with poppy seeds for pain. You name it, someone poured it in a cup, called it medicine, and hoped it worked better than prayers. Historians still argue how effective these night drafts actually were. Some were brilliant blends of local herbs. Others were just hot wine with garlic. One record mentions a soothing cordial, made of boiled leeks, crushed snails, and a whisper of honey. For what ailment, no one is brave enough to guess. You stagger to your feet and clutch your stomach like it's trying to escape. You head toward the kitchen hearth. Not for help, just for proximity to warmth, and maybe to sit somewhere that doesn't feel like it was cursed by a damp witch. The hearth glows, low and red. A pot bubbles gently nearby. You lean on the edge and breathe deeply. Regret, mostly. And cabbage. The cook stirs without looking up. Drink too much again? You nod. She hands you a cracked wooden cup filled with a thick, steaming liquid. It smells like wet parsley and defeat. Medicinal mead, she says. You hesitate. You want your stomach to stop yelling or not? You sip. It's terrible. Like licking a tree that's been marinated in despair. But halfway through, your belly eases. The cramps dull. The dizziness flattens. You even burp a little, which feels like a personal triumph. You sit down on a stool by the fire and rest your head against the wall. For the first time tonight, you're not cold, not itching, not listening for ghost footsteps in the rafters. You're just tired. Quirky medieval note: many castles had house recipes for nighttime remedies. Brewed by the cook, the healer, or whoever was least likely to confuse mugwort with hemlock. These concoctions were passed down like heirlooms, often guarded more closely than family crests. You wonder what's in this one. Then decide not to ask. The fire pops softly beside you. Somewhere, someone sneezes. A rat skitters across the floor and disappears under the grain bins. A dog howls once and then sighs as if to say, I've accepted this life. You should too. You finish your drink. You lean your head back. And in that quiet, fire-warmed, cabbage-scented corner you drift. Not because it's comfortable, but because sometimes, just not being in active distress is enough to count as peace. You're jolted awake by what sounds like an entire army tripping over itself. But it's not soldiers. It's one boy. A page, maybe 13. Skinny as a whip, louder than a bell tower, and entirely oblivious to the idea of nighttime silence. He's clattering down the corridor in boots that weren't made for walking, or sneaking, or existing indoors after midnight. You groan. Somewhere in the dark, someone hurls a crust of bread in his general direction. He dodges. Barely. And laughs. Because here's the thing about castle life. No matter how dark, how cold, how haunted, how utterly flea-infested it gets, there is always one person who simply doesn't sleep. Tonight it's him. The page zips past your mat again, this time swinging a wooden practice sword. He's whisper-shouting something about defending the southern stairwell from invisible assassins. You contemplate tripping him with your foot. You don't. But you contemplate it hard enough that your conscience gives you a warning nudge. He dashes past the hearth, knocking over a stool. The pig dog lifts his head, looks offended, and then goes back to snoring. Pages in medieval castles were part errand runner, part apprentice, part chaos gremlin. Their job? Learn court life, fetch things, occasionally polish armor, and frequently test the patience of everyone over the age of 15. At night, they were supposed to sleep like everyone else, rolled in a cloak somewhere quiet. But some didn't. Historians still argue whether these sleepless youths were just restless, or if they were assigned to low-key guard duties, listening for trouble, carrying urgent messages. Or maybe they just drank too much cider and liked pretending they were knights in training. This one? He's on his third lap around the Great Hall, and showing no signs of slowing down. He skids to a halt next to you. "Did you hear the bell?" he asks breathlessly. You nod. 4 hours ago. He grins. Thought it sounded weird. Like haunted weird. You say nothing. Do you think the tapestry really moved? You shrug. Maybe it was the wind. He leans in conspiratorially. Or maybe it was Lord Edmund's ghost. Again. You give him a look. The kind that says, please let me age in peace. Then, for no clear reason, he runs off, cackling like he just bested a dragon with a potato. You lie back down. You can still hear him thudding around upstairs now. Probably rearranging cutlery into a sword rack. Or organizing a one-boy siege on the buttery. His energy is baffling. Eternal. Entirely incompatible with sleep. Quirky note. There's an old castle record describing a page who stayed up 3 nights straight. In vigil and mischief. They caught him drawing battle maps in chalk across the servants' staircases. When asked why, he reportedly answered, I was preventing boredom. Same energy. You close your eyes. Try to return to the not-quite sleep you were in before he arrived like a storm in a wine barrel. You picture the kid 5 years from now, taller, calmer, maybe even knighthood-bound. But tonight? He's a gremlin in hose and leather boots, fueled by gossip, day-old honey cakes, and the unshakable belief that he's the hero of this story. And honestly, you kind of hope he is. Because in a castle where everything else feels like survival, he's the only one still playing. You fall asleep, briefly, somewhere between the page's 4th battle cry and someone tripping over a chamber pot in the corridor again. And when you wake, for once, it's not from a noise. It's from a dream. A dream where firelight flickers off cold stone. Where arrows whistle through the air. Where voices shout, panicked, urgent. You're standing on the ramparts, heart pounding, staring down into blackness as unseen enemies move through the trees. You blink awake. But your pulse? Still racing. Because in a castle, you never forget the design is defensive first, livable second. Everything around you was built with siege in mind. The arrow slits. The spiraled stairs, always turning clockwise, to favor right-handed defenders. The portcullis with its teeth still stained from some long-forgotten raid. The thick walls. The high towers. The murder holes. Oh yes. Murder holes. They sound like bad poetry, but they're real. Small openings in ceilings above the gates or passageways used to drop rocks, boiling water, or other unpleasantries onto invaders. And you've walked under 2 of them today alone. You sit up now, blinking against the darkness, thinking about every corner of this place not as a home, but as a fortress. And somehow, that makes sleep even harder. You glance around. Most others are still curled up, dreaming, snoring, twitching. The pig dog is sprawled across a rush mat like he's been paid to model exhaustion. The kid page is finally asleep, in full armor, naturally, hugging a broom like a beloved lance. And yet here you are, awake, thinking about where you'd run if someone stormed the gate. To the kitchen? Too flammable. The chapel? Bad acoustics for hiding. The west tower? Closest to the escape tunnel, if you know which brick to press. Historians still argue whether castle dwellers rehearsed evacuation plans, or just hoped they'd have enough time to hide. Most records suggest the latter. There were contingency plans, yes, but for nobles. For the rest? It was grab your family, your blanket, and move fast. Quirky fact, some castle architects built false walls, thin facades designed to collapse on invaders or lead them into dead ends. One lord even designed a spiral staircase that reversed direction halfway up to confuse anyone unfamiliar with the layout. Whether it worked or just caused his servants to swear constantly is lost to history. You lie back down and stare up at the rafters. You think about the door, the one with the thick beam across it. Would you be fast enough to bar it in time? Could the boy reach the top tower and sound the alarm? Could you get to the arrow slits? Could you, of all people, man the murder hole? You imagine yourself, hair askew, one boot missing, hurling a heavy cauldron downward with questionable aim. Maybe you'd be terrible at it. Maybe you'd get lucky. Or maybe, just maybe, this whole worry is part of what kept people alive here. The low hum of alertness. The constant awareness that these walls were meant not to coddle, but to shield. You pull your blanket tight. The draft sighs through the floorboards. The wind flutters the edge of the tapestry again, and you almost welcome it now. Almost. Because the truth is, in a castle, you never sleep all the way. Some part of you stays alert, counting steps, mapping exits, listening. And if you're lucky, that part lets the rest of you dream. It's late now. Not quite morning. Not quite night. That in-between hour where the castle holds still, not out of peace, but out of sheer exhaustion. You're lying on your side, blanket half over your shoulder, cheek pressed to the mat. The pig dog snores softly behind you. The fire's out. The page has finally stopped murmuring about trebuchets in his sleep. And for a moment, it's quiet. Too quiet. That's the thing most people don't realize. In a medieval castle, silence doesn't mean calm. Silence means attention. Because usually, there's a chorus of low hums and scuffles, the whisper of rats, the clink of chain mail, the rustle of straw, the occasional mysterious strip no one ever locates. But now, nothing. Which somehow makes every sound sharper. Your own breath. The creak of the beam. The pulse in your ears. You sit up slowly. And listen. Still nothing. You shuffle across the stone floor toward the nearest slit window and press your cheek to the cold sill. Outside, the stars hang like needles. The trees below are motionless. Even the wind has taken a night off. You look out over the courtyard, then across to the other tower, then down. There it is. A tiny glimmer. Light. A faint flicker from the south wing. The old barracks. Supposed to be abandoned. Used for storage now. Or rats. Or stories no one finishes telling. You blink. It flickers again. Then disappears. Your breath fogs the stone. You pull your cloak tighter. You step back. See, this isn't fear now. Not exactly. You're just aware. You've been here long enough. Slept through enough odd noises, strange gusts, weird dreams and tapestry twitches. What gets you now isn't the noise. It's the absence of it. Silence, in a place this old, isn't restful. It's loaded. A castle is made to echo. It wants to carry sound, to hum with life, even when that life is snoring and arguing with a chamber pot. So when it doesn't, that's when your mind starts to wander. Did you lock the shutter? Is the door latched? Was that a boot print in the ash by the hearth? You glance around the hall. Most of the others are still asleep. One servant stirs. Another rolls over and mumbles something about cheese. And then, a creak. Not near. Not loud. Just one soft, deliberate floorboard pop in the stairwell above. You don't move. Because when a castle goes this quiet, you're not supposed to run. Or call out. Or grab the pig dog and make a break for the buttery. You're supposed to wait. Historians still debate whether this instinct, to freeze, to listen, to feel a structure, was passed down or learned on cold floors during colder nights. But you know now, the people who lived in castles didn't sleep deeply. They couldn't. The silence taught them to listen. Quirky fact: in some keeps, nobles commissioned special tiles near bedroom doors that creaked on purpose. Not for aesthetics. For warnings. So no one could approach without being heard. You suddenly appreciate the hallway's warped board that squeals when stepped on. May it squeal forever. You lie back down, eyes still open, blanket up to your chin. And you remind yourself. Quiet doesn't mean safe. But it doesn't mean danger either. Sometimes, it just means the castle is listening, too. The moment the silence finally breaks, it's not with a bang. It's with a sniffle. A long, slow, mucus-heavy sniffle that echoes off stone like a sad horn at sea. You open one eye. Across the hall, a stable hand is sitting upright, wrapped in a cloak, nose running like a river in spring. His eyes are glassy. His shoulders are hunched. He looks like he's lost 3 battles, 2 chickens, and the will to keep breathing through his face. He sniffles again. Someone tosses him a rag. Possibly a sock. And just like that, the spell of silence shatters. One by one, the castle stirs. Someone groans. Someone curses quietly. Someone, not naming names, farts. And then the bell. Not the ghostly, middle-of-the-night toll. Not the subtle chime that leaves you wondering if time still exists. This is the morning bell, a clang with intent. Brutal. Honest. The acoustic equivalent of being slapped with a frozen trout. You sit up. Your spine pops. Your knees protest. Your left eye refuses to focus on anything except the pig dog, who is already wide awake and wagging his tail like he's somehow well rested. The bell rings again, and the castle lurches into action. People rise from the floor like awkward weeds. Blankets are folded, or shoved into corners. Mats are rolled. Someone starts a small fire and immediately burns half their sleeve off. The page is trying to put on both boots at once. The stable hand sneezes like a cannon. You blink toward the arrow slit. Outside, the first light of dawn brushes across the trees. Pale. Weak. Tired, like it partied too hard and is only now remembering it has a job to do. You breathe in. The castle smells like ash, damp wool, and porridge that started cooking before it decided what flavor it wanted to be. You stand. Because now, whether you like it or not, it's day. And here's the secret no one ever tells you about medieval castles. Night is hard. But mornings are cruel. You made it through ghosts, fleas, snoring nobles, chamber pot disasters, medicinal mead, whispering tapestries, and one overly enthusiastic page. And what's your reward? A lukewarm wooden mug of barley mash and another day full of tasks, drafts, and the faint but constant fear that someone's going to ask you to carry something up 3 flights of stone stairs. Quirky detail. Many castles had no wake-up call, except bells, body clocks, or a servant tasked with poking people until they moved. In one documented case, a steward simply walked through the keep shouting, "The light is upon us!" every morning. You imagine that went over great. You trudge toward the hearth, where a small pot of whatever that is steams gently. Someone hands you a wooden spoon. You nod, half human, half blanket. You eat slowly. It's edible. Probably. And just as you take the second bite, someone slaps your shoulder and says, "You're on chamber duty this morning." You close your eyes. Take one deep, heroic breath. And exhale a quiet, resigned medieval. No. The sun is fully up now. Not warm, not golden, not the kind of sunrise that makes you think life is beautiful and every breath is a gift. No, this one's pale and watery, like it showed up late and didn't bring breakfast. You step out into the courtyard wrapped in your cloak, feeling like a survivor of a mild but deeply personal disaster. Your boots crunch over frosted straw. A line of servants is already scrubbing pots with stiff brushes and stiffer expressions. Somewhere above, a weathercock creaks as it adjusts to a breeze that smells like firewood and old cheese. You stretch. Something in your spine makes a noise like a drawbridge trying to lower itself with dignity. And as you glance back at the towering keep, the windows, the towers, the halls where you didn't sleep so much as endure, you feel it. You survived the night. That's no small thing. Because this castle? It's not just stone and mortar. It's a living thing. A creaking, sighing, itchy, echoing beast with cold bones and a memory longer than yours. You think about the places you spent the night. The chapel, whispering to saints. The hall, with its concert of snorers. The hearth, where you drank cabbage tea and questioned reality. The tapestry, still twitching. You're pretending that didn't happen. And the dreams. The half-sleep. The endless parade of small discomforts that somehow add up to an almost heroic level of exhaustion. You're not sure how people did this every night. You're also not sure they did. Historians still argue whether medieval folks ever slept well. The consensus seems to be, not really. And yet, they got up. Every day. They worked. They prayed. They stitched tapestries and baked bread and sharpened swords and traded gossip and fell in love and tried to figure out how to keep their feet warm while lying on damp straw. And so do you. You drag your blanket to the edge of the courtyard where others are laying theirs out in the sun. You beat it once, and a small, angry flea jumps off like it's been evicted. Good. The pig dog follows you, tail wagging, tongue lolling, blissfully unbothered by the psychological damage of communal sleeping. A cook passes by and offers you a crust of bread with a shrug. You accept it like it's a trophy. Because it is. And tonight, you'll do it all again. You'll light a candle. Or beg for one. You'll lay down a blanket on a floor that's somehow harder than logic. You'll fight the cold. The itch. The cough. The squire with his endless throat clearing. The noble with his earthquake snore. And you'll survive. Maybe even sleep. A little. Because surviving a medieval castle night isn't about comfort. It's about endurance. Creativity. The right combination of wool and resignation. And maybe, just maybe, remembering to hang your nightshirt near the hearth instead of in the draft by the buttery. So now, with the fire long gone and the morning light softening across the keep, let your breath slow. In. And out. The night is over. The echoes have faded. The stone walls, cold and stern, no longer feel like they're pressing in. The fleas are quiet now. Even the pig dog has curled beside your feet like a pillow made of snorts. Let the rustle of the early morning stirrings become distant, like the tide moving far away from shore. Picture the great hall, no longer bustling, but still. The tapestries unmoving. The floor swept. The chamber pots, mercifully, emptied. And you? You made it through the night. You found rest in the unrest. Even in a castle built more for war than warmth, you found a sliver of quiet. A moment. A breath. A corner of blanket just wide enough to pull over your shoulder and believe, however briefly, that sleep is possible here. Let your mind drift now, not toward the cold, or the strange tapping, or that one floorboard that moaned like a ghost trying to remember a hymn. But toward stillness. Toward the feel of thick wool on your skin. The smell of ashes. The hum of wind, far away now. The way the candlelight once danced across the stone and reminded you that night doesn't last forever. The castle will sleep again soon. And so will you. Close your eyes. Let the weight of the night fall away. Let the flickering worries slow. You don't need to guard the passage, chase the shadows, or solve the mystery behind the tapestry. Not tonight. You've earned rest. Deep. Quiet. Real. Sleep well, brave castle dweller. You survived. Hey guys. Thank you so much for being here. Your support means a lot and I look forward to bringing you new topics soon. Stay kind, stay inspired, and I'll see you